The timer read 4:37 when Detective Sarah Chen received the call that would change everything. A homemade explosive device had been discovered in the basement of Roosevelt Elementary School, where 200 children and staff were trapped inside during their annual science fair. The evacuation had failed when a second device was found blocking the main exit. Every second that ticked by brought them closer to disaster, and the only person qualified to defuse both bombs was someone the department had nicknamed Safety Sarah behind her back. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. Detective Sarah Chen stood 5 feet 3 inches tall in her regulation boots, with hands so steady they could thread a needle during an earthquake. At 28, she possessed a master's degree in chemistry, had graduated top of her class from the police academy, and could recite the components of every known explosive compound from memory. Yet in the 3 years since joining the Metro Police Department's bomb squad, she had never been assigned to a live device. The morning had started like every other at the Riverside Police Station. Sarah arrived at 0530, a full hour before her shift began, carrying her usual thermos of green tea and a notebook filled with diagrams she had drawn the night before. While her colleagues grabbed coffee and discussed weekend plans, Sarah reviewed blast patterns, studied detonation sequences, and practiced defusing techniques on training devices she had built herself. The bomb squad bay felt more like a garage than a specialized unit headquarters. Equipment cases lined the walls, some dating back to the 1990s, and the air always carried the faint scent of lubricating oil and metal polish. Sarah's workstation occupied a corner near the back, where she had created what others called her paranoia shrine. 3 computer monitors displayed live feeds from security cameras around the city. Chemical composition charts covered every available wall space, and meticulously organized toolkits filled 2 entire cabinets. Sergeant Mike Rodriguez entered the bay carrying a stack of incident reports, his weathered face showing the fatigue of someone who had worked graveyard shifts for 15 years. He surveyed the room until his eyes landed on Sarah's corner setup, then shook his head with familiar disapproval. "Chen, what's all this?" Rodriguez gestured toward the monitors and charts. "This looks like a conspiracy theorist's bedroom." Sarah looked up from the circuit board she was examining, her dark eyes reflecting the screen's glow. "Security feeds, Sergeant. I monitor unusual activity patterns that might indicate explosive placement." "That's not your job. Your job is equipment maintenance and training scenarios." Rodriguez dropped the reports on her desk with a thud. "Speaking of which, these incident reports need filing, and the practice devices need recalibration before the afternoon training session." The familiar sting of disappointment settled in Sarah's chest. 3 years of requesting field assignments, 3 years of watching less qualified officers handle actual devices while she organized paperwork and cleaned equipment. She had submitted 17 formal requests for active duty. Each one met with the same response: too inexperienced, too careful, too much of a liability in high-pressure situations. Detective Tom Mitchell entered the bay, followed by Officer Lisa Park, both members of the squad's primary response team. Mitchell stood 6 feet tall with arms that looked like they could wrestle a bear, while Park possessed the kind of confident swagger that came from successfully defusing 12 live devices in her 2-year career. They represented everything Sarah was not: experienced, proven, and trusted with the department's most dangerous assignments. "Morning, Safety Sarah," Mitchell called out, using the nickname that had followed her since academy training. "Still building your doomsday bunker over there?" Park laughed, a sound that grated against Sarah's nerves like fingernails on a chalkboard. "I heard she stays up all night reading explosive manuals. Who does that?" "Someone who wants to be prepared," Sarah replied quietly, turning back to her work. "Prepared for what?" Mitchell pressed. "Rodriguez assigns you to equipment duty because you freeze up under pressure. Remember the training exercise last month?" Sarah remembered. The scenario had involved a simulated bomb threat at a shopping mall, complete with actors playing panicked civilians and a timer counting down from 10 minutes. Sarah had approached the device methodically, checking and rechecking every connection, analyzing each component before proceeding. Her thoroughness had taken 7 minutes, leaving only 3 minutes on the timer when she successfully defused the practice bomb. 7 minutes, Park said, echoing Sarah's thoughts. In the real world, you would have gotten everyone killed. In the real world, rushing leads to mistakes, Sarah countered. Every explosive device has a personality, a specific logic to its construction. You can't understand that personality in 30 seconds. You can't save lives in 7 minutes either, Mitchell shot back. Speed matters, Chen. People are counting on us to work fast. Rodriguez returned from his office, overhearing the last part of the conversation. Mitchell's right. In this job, hesitation kills people. Sarah, you're technically sound, but you lack the instincts for field work. That's why you handle support duties. The words stung because they echoed every evaluation Sarah had received. Technically proficient but lacks field instincts. Thorough, but too slow for emergency response. Methodical but unsuited for high-pressure situations. The assessments never mentioned her perfect scores on written exams, her innovative solutions to complex training scenarios, or her ability to spot explosive components that others missed. Sarah's phone buzzed with a text from her younger brother Kevin, a graduate student studying engineering at the local university. How's work? Still saving the world one training manual at a time? Even her family didn't take her career seriously. Kevin meant well, but his teasing reflected the same dismissive attitude she faced at work. Everyone saw her caution as weakness, her preparation as obsession, her thoroughness as incompetence. The radio crackled to life, cutting through the squad room's casual atmosphere. All units, we have a bomb threat at Roosevelt Elementary School. Repeat, active bomb threat with device confirmed. Bomb squad requested immediately. Rodriguez grabbed his gear, his demeanor shifting instantly from casual supervisor to emergency commander. Mitchell, Park, you're with me. Sarah, monitor communications and prepare backup equipment. Sergeant, I'd like to respond with the team, Sarah said, standing up from her workstation. Negative. You're not qualified for live device response. I've completed the same training as everyone else. My scores were actually higher than... Higher scores don't mean field readiness, Rodriguez interrupted. You can study explosives all day, but defusing a live bomb requires instincts you don't have. Stay here and coordinate from base. Sarah watched through the bay windows as the response team loaded their equipment into the armored truck. Mitchell and Park moved with practiced efficiency, their confidence evident in every gesture. They represented everything Sarah aspired to be: trusted, capable, essential. As the truck disappeared around the corner, sirens wailing, Sarah felt the familiar weight of exclusion settle on her shoulders. The dispatch radio provided updates as the situation developed. 2 devices had been found in the school. The first was discovered in the basement by a maintenance worker, the second near the main entrance by a security guard. Initial evacuation attempts had failed because the second device blocked the primary exit route. 200 people remained trapped inside, including 150 children attending the annual science fair. Sarah pulled up the school's architectural plans on her computer, studying the layout with the intensity of a surgeon examining X-rays. Roosevelt Elementary was a 1960s brick building with a basement that housed the cafeteria, gymnasium, and mechanical systems. The main floor contained classrooms and administrative offices, while a second floor held the library and computer lab. The building had 4 possible exit routes, but only 2 were accessible from the basement where most people had gathered for the science fair. The radio crackled again. Bomb squad leader to dispatch. First device is sophisticated, appears to be timer activated with anti-tamper mechanisms. Requesting additional time for analysis. Sarah's heart rate increased as she listened to Rodriguez's voice. Sophisticated devices required careful analysis. Exactly the kind of methodical approach that had earned her criticism during training. She pulled up her extensive database of explosive configurations, cross-referencing timer mechanisms with anti-tamper systems. Base to bomb squad leader, the dispatcher responded. How much time do you need? Unknown at this time. Device is unlike anything in our training manuals. Multiple wire configurations, possible pressure triggers. Sarah stood up abruptly, her chair rolling backward. The description Rodriguez provided matched a configuration she had studied extensively in her private research. Eastern European design, typically used by organized crime groups. featuring a dual activation system that required specific disarming sequences. She had written a 20-page analysis of similar devices after reading about them in international law enforcement journals. "Dispatch, this is Chen at base." Sarah keyed her radio. "I have information about the device configuration." "Go ahead, Chen." "Based on the description, it sounds like a Kozlov design. Eastern European pattern with timer primary and pressure backup. Disarming sequence requires cutting blue wires first, then red, with a 30-second delay between cuts." Rodriguez's voice came back sharp and irritated. "Chen, you're not on scene. Don't guess about device types based on radio descriptions." "It's not a guess, Sergeant. I've studied this exact configuration. The pressure trigger activates if the timer reaches 0 or if primary disarming is attempted without proper sequence. We'll handle the analysis from here. Chen, maintain radio discipline." Sarah stared at her monitors, watching security camera feeds from around the city, while her colleagues dealt with a situation she could help resolve. The irony wasn't lost on her. 3 years of being told she was too careful, too methodical, too obsessed with details, and now those same qualities could save lives if anyone would listen. Her phone rang, displaying Kevin's number. Sarah answered without taking her eyes off the monitors. "Sarah, I'm at the university and we can see the police cars from here. Is that your squad?" "Yes, but I'm not with them. I'm stuck at base doing support work." "Maybe that's for the best." "Sounds dangerous." Sarah closed her eyes, feeling frustration build in her chest like pressure in a steam kettle. Even her brother assumed she was better suited for safe assignments, protected from the real dangers that required real police officers. "Kevin, I need to go." "Stay safe, sis. Leave the hero stuff to people who are built for it." The comment hit harder than Kevin intended. Built for it, as if courage came in specific sizes, as if competence required certain physical dimensions. Sarah had proven herself academically, technically, and intellectually, but apparently none of that mattered when measured against arbitrary perceptions of what a bomb disposal expert should look like. The radio crackled with an update that made Sarah's blood run cold. "Bomb squad to dispatch. Timer shows 18 minutes remaining. We're having difficulty accessing the device due to confined space and poor lighting." 18 minutes for 2 devices meant 9 minutes per bomb, assuming equal complexity. Sarah knew from her research that Kozlov devices typically required 12 to 15 minutes for safe disarming, even for experienced technicians. Her team was attempting something that might be technically impossible within the available time frame. Sarah pulled up the school security camera system, hacking into the network using techniques she had learned during her computer science studies. The footage showed Rodriguez and Mitchell crouched in the basement, their flashlights creating harsh shadows as they examined the first device. Park stood nearby, coordinating with the evacuation team that was trying to find alternative exit routes. The device appeared exactly as Sarah had predicted. Gray metal casing, multiple wire bundles, LED timer display, and what looked like pressure sensors attached to the base. Every detail matched the Kozlov configuration she had studied obsessively during her off-duty hours. "Base to bomb squad." Sarah keyed her radio again. "The pressure sensors are likely connected to the wire bundle on the left side. Cutting any wire before disabling those sensors will trigger immediate detonation." "Chen, I told you to maintain radio discipline." Rodriguez snapped back. "We don't need armchair analysis from someone who's never seen a live device." Never seen a live device. The phrase echoed in Sarah's mind as she watched her colleagues struggle with a situation that matched her theoretical knowledge perfectly. She had never been given the chance to see a live device because supervisors deemed her unsuitable for field work. A perfect catch-22. No experience because no opportunities. No opportunities because no experience. Sarah made a decision that would either vindicate 3 years of preparation or end her career permanently. She gathered her personal equipment kit, the one she had assembled using her own money and stored in her car. The kit contained specialized tools not included in department-issued gear, fiber optic cameras, electromagnetic field detectors, and chemical sensors that could identify explosive compounds from trace residue. "Dispatch. This is Chen. I'm responding to Roosevelt Elementary as backup support." "Negative, Chen. You're not authorized for field response. Sarah was already walking toward her car, her equipment bag slung over her shoulder. "I'm not responding as primary technician. I'm bringing additional equipment that might be needed." It was a thin justification, but technically within regulations. Support personnel could respond to provide additional resources if requested by field commanders. Rodriguez hadn't requested anything, but he also hadn't specifically forbidden her presence on scene. The drive to Roosevelt Elementary took 8 minutes through traffic that parted reluctantly for her emergency lights. Sarah used the time to review everything she knew about Kozlov devices, running through disarming sequences and potential complications. The original designer, Viktor Kozlov, had been a Soviet military engineer who created the configuration for use in urban environments where space was limited and detection likely. The devices were specifically designed to defeat hasty disarming attempts. Roosevelt Elementary came into view as Sarah rounded the final corner. Police cars surrounded the building, their red and blue lights painting the brick walls in alternating colors. Evacuation teams had established a perimeter 2 blocks away, where parents gathered behind barriers, their faces showing the particular anguish that came from having children in danger. Sarah parked behind the bomb squad truck and approached the command post, where Lieutenant Commander Davis coordinated the overall response. Davis looked up as she approached, his expression shifting from surprise to annoyance. "Chen, what are you doing here?" "Rodriguez said you were handling base communications." "I brought additional equipment that might be useful," Sarah replied, holding up her kit. "Specialized sensors and imaging tools." Rodriguez didn't request additional equipment. "The situation is more complex than initially assessed. I have experience with this type of device configuration." Davis studied her for a moment, weighing departmental protocol against potential tactical advantage. "You stay with me at the command post. If Rodriguez needs your equipment, he'll request it." Sarah nodded, knowing it was the best she could hope for under the circumstances. She set up her equipment at the command post, connecting her fiber optic camera to a portable monitor and calibrating her chemical sensors. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story. The devices weren't standard police issue because Sarah had purchased them herself, using money from her second job teaching chemistry at a community college. The radio provided a constant stream of updates as Rodriguez's team worked on the first device. Their progress was slower than optimal, complicated by the device's placement in a utility closet with limited maneuvering room. Sarah listened to their descriptions and cross-referenced them with her database of known configurations. "Device appears to have multiple timer displays," Rodriguez reported, unable to determine which one is functional. Sarah spoke quietly to Davis. "Kozlov devices use decoy timers to confuse disposal attempts. The functional timer is always the one with the smallest digital display, usually located on the back of the device." Davis keyed his radio. "Rodriguez, Chen suggests checking the back of the device for a smaller timer display." "Copy. We found it. Timer shows 11 minutes. 11 minutes for 2 devices." Sarah felt her chest tighten as she calculated the mathematics of the situation. Even if Rodriguez successfully defused the first device, which would likely take the full 11 minutes given their methodical approach, there would be no time remaining for the second bomb. "Lieutenant, permission to approach the scene with additional equipment," Sarah requested. "Denied. You're not qualified for live device response." Sarah watched the monitor connected to her fiber optic camera, which she had jury-rigged to tap into the school's security system. The basement showed Rodriguez and Mitchell working on the first device while Park coordinated with evacuation teams. Their movements appeared professional but lacked the specific knowledge Sarah possessed about Kozlov configurations. "The wire sequence is critical," Sarah said, more to herself than to Davis. "Blue wires disable the pressure triggers, red wires stop the timer, but cutting them in the wrong order or without proper intervals triggers automatic detonation." Davis looked at her sharply. "How do you know that?" "I studied these devices during my off-duty time. Read everything available about Eastern European explosive configurations. This is a Kozlov design, probably assembled by someone with organized crime connections." "You studied bomb designs in your spare time?" "I studied everything related to explosive ordnance disposal. Chemical compositions, detonation patterns, international configurations, historical incidents. I wanted to be prepared for any situation." Davis shook his head. "Rodriguez was right. You are obsessed with this stuff." The radio crackled with an update that made Sarah's heart race. First device successfully disabled. Moving to second location. Timer shows 7 minutes remaining. 7 minutes for a device that typically required 12 to 15 minutes for safe disarming. Sarah watched through the security cameras as Rodriguez's team moved toward the main entrance where the second bomb waited. Their relief at successfully handling the first device was evident in their more relaxed postures. But Sarah knew they were walking into a more complex situation. "Lieutenant, the second device is likely more sophisticated than the first," Sarah said urgently. Kozlov configurations often use a primary device as a test, with the secondary being more heavily protected. Chen, you're speculating based on theoretical knowledge. It's not speculation. I've documented 17 incidents involving this configuration pattern. The secondary device always includes additional anti-tamper mechanisms. Davis studied her face, perhaps recognizing the certainty in her voice. What kind of additional mechanisms? Motion sensors, light-sensitive triggers, sometimes audio activation. The device is designed to detonate if approached incorrectly, or if ambient conditions change too rapidly. The radio erupted with Rodriguez's voice, tinged with stress that hadn't been present during the first disarming. Second device is significantly more complex. Multiple sensor arrays, what appears to be motion detection equipment. Sarah stood up abruptly. "Lieutenant, I need to be down there. I know how to approach motion-sensitive devices." "Absolutely not. You're support personnel. I'm the only person here who has studied this specific configuration extensively. My colleagues are walking into a situation that requires knowledge they don't possess." Davis hesitated, his command training warring with situational reality. Rodriguez has 15 years of experience. 15 years of experience with standard American explosive devices. This is Eastern European technology that requires specific disarming protocols. The radio crackled again. "Device appears to be responding to our presence. Motion sensors are activating, and timer is fluctuating between different readings." Sarah felt panic rising in her chest. Fluctuating timers indicated that the device was shifting between different operational modes, probably in response to detected movement. If Rodriguez continued his standard approach, the bomb would likely switch to immediate detonation mode. "Lieutenant, they need to stop moving immediately and withdraw to minimum safe distance. The device is entering defensive mode." Davis keyed his radio. "Rodriguez, hold position. Chen believes the device is responding to movement. We can see that. Timer just shifted to 2 minutes and is counting down rapidly." 2 minutes. Sarah felt time compress around her like a physical force. 2 minutes to save 200 lives, to prove that 3 years of careful preparation had been worthwhile, to demonstrate that being too careful was actually being prepared enough. "Lieutenant, I'm going in." "Chen, that's a direct order. You are not authorized for live device response." Sarah looked at Davis, then at the monitor showing children and teachers huddled in the basement, waiting for someone to save them. "Sir, with respect, those people are going to die if someone doesn't act immediately. I have the knowledge necessary to disarm that device." "You have theoretical knowledge. There's a difference. Today, theory is all we have." Sarah grabbed her equipment kit and headed toward the school entrance before Davis could physically stop her. Behind her, she heard him shouting into his radio, probably ordering Rodriguez to prevent her approach. But Rodriguez was 70 feet away in a basement, dealing with a device that was counting down to mass murder. The school's main hallway felt eerily quiet after the chaos of the command post. Emergency lighting cast long shadows across the linoleum floor, and the air carried the acrid smell of electronic equipment running beyond normal parameters. Sarah moved carefully toward the main entrance, where she could see the outline of the second device attached to the doorframe. Her radio crackled with Davis's voice. "Chen, return to the command post immediately. That's a direct order." Sarah switched off her radio and continued forward. Some orders were worth breaking, especially when following them meant watching innocent people die. She approached the device slowly, her movements deliberate and measured, exactly the kind of careful approach that had earned her criticism during training exercises. The bomb was beautiful in its complexity. Multiple wire bundles connected various components. LED displays showed different countdown sequences, and sensors of several types were arranged around the central housing. Sarah recognized the configuration immediately. Kozlov Mark III, the most sophisticated version of the design, typically reserved for high-value targets or situations requiring absolute reliability. She activated her fiber optic camera and fed it toward the device, studying the internal configuration on her portable monitor. The bomb's construction confirmed her worst fears: motion sensors, light sensitivity, audio triggers, and what appeared to be a backup radio detonator in case the primary systems failed. Sarah's training took over, 3 years of methodical study translating into muscle memory as she identified each component and its function. The device was designed to defeat exactly the kind of hasty disarming attempt that emergency situations typically required. It rewarded patience, punished speed, and demanded the kind of thorough analysis that had earned her the nickname Safety Sarah. She began the disarming sequence, her hands steady despite the adrenaline flooding her system. Blue wires first, cut in sequence from left to right with 30-second intervals between cuts. The motion sensors deactivated one by one, their indicator lights shifting from red to green as the device recognized proper disarming protocol. The timer continued counting down. 43 seconds, 42, 41. Sarah moved to the next phase, using her electromagnetic field detector to identify which wires carried live current and which were decoys. The Kozlov design included numerous false leads, wires that appeared functional but served only to confuse disposal attempts. 28 seconds. Red wires next, but only after confirming that the pressure sensors had been properly disabled. Sarah's chemical sensor detected traces of RDX explosive, confirming the device's lethal potential. 2 pounds of RDX in an enclosed space would kill everyone within a 50-foot radius and cause structural damage that could bring down the entire building. 15 seconds. Sarah's hands moved with practiced precision, cutting the final sequence of wires in the exact order required by Kozlov protocol. Each cut brought a small click from the device's internal mechanisms, like the sound of a complex lock disengaging. 5 seconds. The timer froze, its display showing 0:04, then shifted to a series of dashes indicating successful disarming. Sarah sat back on her heels, breathing heavily as the magnitude of what she had just accomplished settled over her. The radio she had switched off began crackling with excited voices, as field teams reported the successful disarming of both devices. Sarah turned it back on to hear Rodriguez's voice, filled with relief and confusion. Both devices are neutralized. Repeat. Both devices are safe. Beginning evacuation procedures immediately. Davis's voice came through clearly. Rodriguez, who disarmed the second device? There was a pause before Rodriguez replied. Chen was here when we arrived to secure the scene. Device was already disabled. Sarah smiled as she carefully packed her equipment. Let them figure out the timeline later. Right now, 200 people were about to walk out of Roosevelt Elementary alive because someone had been too careful, too thorough, too obsessed with details that others considered irrelevant. She stood up and began walking toward the exit, where she could already hear the sounds of celebration as children and teachers prepared to leave the building. Behind her, the disabled bomb sat harmless and silent, its complex mechanisms defeated by the kind of methodical approach that had been criticized as unsuitable for emergency response. As Sarah reached the main entrance, she encountered Rodriguez and Mitchell coming toward her, their faces showing a mixture of relief and bewilderment. Chen, Rodriguez said, his voice carrying a tone she had never heard before. How did you know how to disarm that device? I studied the configuration extensively during my off-duty time, Sarah replied. 3 years of preparation for exactly this type of situation. Mitchell shook his head in amazement. That thing was like nothing we'd ever seen before. The sensors, the multiple timers, the wire configurations. It was designed to kill anyone who tried to disarm it. It was designed to kill anyone who tried to disarm it quickly, Sarah corrected. It rewarded patience and punished haste. Exactly the opposite of our usual training protocols. Rodriguez stared at her for a long moment. You saved 200 lives, Chen. 200 people are going home tonight because you were prepared for something that shouldn't have been possible. As they walked toward the exit together, Sarah felt a satisfaction that went beyond professional accomplishment. She had proven that being too careful was actually being careful enough, that thorough preparation was worth more than quick reflexes, that sometimes the person everyone underestimated was exactly the person everyone needed. The celebration outside was already beginning, as children reunited with their parents and teachers hugged each other in relief. Sarah watched from the steps of Roosevelt Elementary as the crowd began to disperse, families heading home with stories they would remember forever. Lieutenant Davis approached her, his expression serious but respectful. "Chen, we need to discuss what happened here today." "Yes, sir. I understand I violated protocol by responding without authorization." Davis studied her face. "You also saved 200 lives using knowledge and skills that no one else in the department possesses. That creates an interesting situation from a disciplinary standpoint." Sarah nodded, accepting whatever consequences would follow. She had made her choice and would live with the results. Some things were worth the risk of career damage, and preventing mass murder definitely qualified. "Report to my office tomorrow at 0800. Davis continued. "We're going to have a very long conversation about your future with this department." As Davis walked away, Sarah remained on the school steps, watching the last of the families disappear into the evening. The crisis was over, the immediate danger past, but she suspected that the real changes were just beginning. Tomorrow would bring questions about her unauthorized response, investigations into her methods, and probably a formal review of her fitness for duty. But tonight, 200 people were alive because someone had been too careful, too thorough, too obsessed with details that others dismissed as paranoia. Sarah smiled as she loaded her equipment into her car. Being safety Sarah had finally paid off in the most important way possible. The nickname that had followed her like a burden for 3 years now felt like a badge of honor. As she drove home through the quiet streets, Sarah's phone buzzed with a text from Kevin. "Saw the news about the school. Heard bomb squad saved everyone. Proud of you for keeping them safe from base." Sarah didn't reply immediately. Let him think she had helped from a distance, coordinating communications and providing support. The full story would come out eventually, but for now, she was content to know that her brother's sister had made a difference when it mattered most. The real test would come tomorrow, when superiors who had spent 3 years dismissing her capabilities would have to acknowledge that being too careful had been exactly the right approach. Sarah looked forward to that conversation with the kind of anticipation that came from finally having proof that preparation, patience, and attention to detail were not character flaws, but life-saving virtues. She pulled into her apartment complex parking lot and sat in her car for a moment, reflecting on the day's events. 3 years of being underestimated, 3 years of careful preparation, and finally, 3 years of vindication compressed into 18 minutes of the most important work she had ever done. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities, and hopefully, new respect for the person everyone called Safety Sarah. But tonight was for celebrating the fact that sometimes being too careful was exactly careful enough. The morning after Roosevelt Elementary brought changes that Sarah hadn't anticipated. She arrived at the station to find her desk moved from the corner to the center of the bomb squad bay, surrounded by equipment cases that belonged to senior technicians. A stack of commendation forms waited next to her computer, along with interview requests from 3 local news stations and a formal letter from the mayor's office. Detective Rodriguez approached her workstation with an expression Sarah had never seen before. Respect mixed with something that might have been embarrassment, creating a combination that made him appear older than his 52 years. "Chen, we need to talk," he said, pulling up a chair beside her desk. "About yesterday, about your response to the scene, about everything that happened." Sarah saved the explosive residue analysis she had been working on and turned to face her supervisor. "I understand there will be disciplinary action for responding without authorization. That's what we need to discuss." Rodriguez leaned back in his chair, studying her face. Lieutenant Davis spent half the night on the phone with department brass, trying to figure out how to handle someone who broke protocol to save 200 lives. The bay fell quiet as other squad members pretended to focus on their own work while listening to the conversation. Mitchell and Park stood near the equipment lockers, their morning routine suspended as they waited to hear how the department would handle Sarah's unauthorized heroics. "The official investigation concluded that you responded as support personnel to provide additional equipment," Rodriguez continued, "which is technically within regulations, even if the timing was questionable." Sarah felt a mixture of relief and frustration. Relief that her career would survive. Frustration that the department was minimizing her actual contribution to maintain the illusion of proper protocol. However, Rodriguez added. The investigation also revealed some interesting facts about your qualifications and preparation level. He pulled out a thick folder that Sarah recognized as her personnel file, now significantly expanded with new documentation. The folder contained copies of her training certifications, the explosive analysis papers she had written during off-duty time, and photographs of the specialized equipment she had purchased with her own money. 3 advanced chemistry courses taken at your own expense, 47 technical papers on explosive ordnance disposal, downloaded and analyzed during off-duty hours. Specialized equipment worth $15,000 purchased with personal funds. Rodriguez looked up from the file. Why didn't you mention any of this during your performance reviews? Sarah considered her response carefully. Because every time I suggested additional training or requested field assignments, I was told to focus on my assigned duties. Mentioning extra preparation would have been seen as criticism of department training standards. So you decided to train yourself. I decided to be ready for whatever situations might arise. Mitchell approached their conversation, his expression showing the kind of uncertainty that came from having fundamental assumptions challenged. Chen, that device yesterday, how long had you been studying that specific configuration? 18 months, Sarah replied. I identified it as a potential threat pattern after reading incident reports from Eastern European law enforcement agencies. 18 months of studying bombs that might never appear in our jurisdiction? One did appear, yesterday. In our jurisdiction. Park joined the group, carrying her own copy of the incident report from Roosevelt Elementary. The timer analysis you provided was completely accurate, down to the specific wire-cutting sequence and delay intervals. How was that possible without field experience? Sarah stood up and walked to her filing cabinet, retrieving a thick binder that contained her private research collection. The binder held over 300 pages of explosive device analysis, including detailed diagrams, chemical compositions, and disarming procedures for configurations that had never appeared in department training materials. I documented every explosive incident reported in international law enforcement databases over the past 5 years, she explained, opening the binder to show pages of meticulous notes and diagrams. I analyzed patterns, identified emerging technologies, and developed response protocols for devices that hadn't appeared domestically yet. Rodriguez examined the binder, his expression shifting from skepticism to amazement as he flipped through pages of technical analysis. This is graduate-level research. You did this entirely on your own time. Knowledge doesn't operate on department schedules. Threats don't limit themselves to familiar configurations just because we haven't trained for them. Lieutenant Davis entered the bay, his arrival immediately commanding attention from everyone present. He surveyed the group gathered around Sarah's desk, then focused his attention on the open research binder. Chen, my office. Now. Sarah followed Davis through the station corridors, past offices where detectives handled routine cases that seemed insignificant compared to the previous day's crisis. Davis's office occupied a corner of the building, with windows that overlooked the training facility where Sarah had spent countless hours practicing techniques she was never allowed to use operationally. Sit down, Davis commanded, settling behind his desk with the weight of someone preparing for a difficult conversation. Sarah remained standing. Sir, if this is about protocol violations, I accept full responsibility for my actions. This isn't about protocol violations. This is about capabilities assessment and resource allocation. Davis pulled out another folder, this one containing documents Sarah didn't recognize. The FBI contacted us this morning about yesterday's incident. The words sent a chill through Sarah's chest. Federal involvement typically meant either commendation or investigation, and she wasn't sure which possibility worried her more. The explosive devices at Roosevelt Elementary were part of a larger pattern, Davis continued. Similar configurations have appeared in Boston, Philadelphia, and Detroit over the past 6 months. The Bureau has been tracking what they believe is an organized criminal network using Eastern European explosive technology. Sarah felt pieces of a larger puzzle clicking into place. The Kozlov configurations aren't random. They're being distributed as part of a coordinated campaign. The Bureau agrees, and they want to know how a small city police detective identified and neutralized a device configuration that has stumped federal explosive experts in multiple cities. Davis opened the folder to reveal photographs of similar devices, each one showing slight variations on the Kozlov design theme. Some included radio triggers, others featured motion sensors, but all shared the basic configuration that Sarah had studied so extensively. Agent Rebecca Walsh will be here this afternoon to interview you about your analysis methods, Davis said. She's particularly interested in your research into Eastern European explosive patterns. Sarah studied the photographs, recognizing elements from her private research in each device. These aren't exactly Kozlov configurations. They're hybrid designs, combining Eastern European-based technology with American commercial components. Which is exactly what Agent Walsh hopes you can help them understand. The conversation was interrupted by a knock on Davis's door. Rodriguez entered without waiting for permission, his face showing the kind of urgency that accompanied breaking news. "Lieutenant, we have another situation. Bomb threat at Central Commerce Bank. Caller specifically mentioned, quote, timer configuration similar to yesterday's incident." Sarah felt her pulse accelerate. It's connected. The Roosevelt Elementary attack was designed to test response capabilities and identify technical expertise within local law enforcement. Davis stared at her. "What makes you think that?" "Because that's how professional explosive campaigns operate. You probe defenses, assess response times, and identify potential threats to your operational security. Yesterday's success means today's device will be significantly more complex." Rodriguez looked between Sarah and Davis. "The response team is loading equipment now. Mitchell and Park are prepared for deployment." "No," Sarah said firmly. "If I'm right about this being a connected campaign, sending the same team that responded yesterday is exactly what the perpetrators want. They've observed our standard response protocols and designed countermeasures." Davis leaned forward in his chair. "Chen, you're speculating based on limited information. I'm analyzing patterns based on documented behavior from similar campaigns in other cities." Sarah pulled out her phone and accessed the research database she had compiled. Boston lost 2 bomb technicians to a secondary device that specifically targeted standard American disarming procedures. Philadelphia had 3 failed attempts before bringing in federal specialists. You think they're targeting our response team? I think they're targeting our response methods. The configurations are designed to defeat conventional approaches and eliminate experienced technicians who might adapt to their technology. Rodriguez checked his watch. "We need to respond immediately. The bank has over 300 people inside, and evacuation is complicated by the device placement." Sarah stood up abruptly. "I need to be part of the response team." "Absolutely not," Davis replied. "Yesterday was an exception under extreme circumstances. You're not qualified for routine explosive response. This isn't routine. This is asymmetric warfare using explosive devices as weapons against law enforcement capabilities. Standard protocols will get people killed." Davis and Rodriguez exchanged glances, both clearly struggling with the decision between departmental procedure and tactical necessity. Sarah recognized the moment as a pivotal point in her career, possibly in her life. "Lieutenant, I have more relevant knowledge about these device configurations than anyone else in the department. Possibly anyone else in the region. Sending me as support personnel with specialized equipment is within regulations." "Support personnel only," Davis said finally. "You respond with additional equipment and provide technical analysis. Rodriguez maintains operational command." Sarah nodded, knowing it was the best compromise she could achieve under the circumstances. "I'll need access to the full equipment inventory, including the federal-grade detection devices." "Granted." Rodriguez, coordinate with Chen on equipment selection. Deployment in 15 minutes. Sarah rushed back to her workstation, her mind already cataloging the specialized tools that might be necessary for a second-generation device. If her analysis was correct, the bank bomb would include countermeasures specifically designed to defeat the methods that had proven successful at Roosevelt Elementary. Mitchell and Park were loading standard equipment into the response truck when Sarah arrived with her expanded kit. The additional gear included electromagnetic pulse detectors, advanced chemical sensors, and computer equipment for analyzing electronic components in real time. "Planning to carry a laboratory with you?" Mitchell asked, watching Sarah load her equipment cases. "Planning to identify threats before they kill us," Sarah replied. "These aren't random explosive devices. They're specifically engineered to target law enforcement response capabilities." Park examined one of Sarah's devices, a sophisticated sensor array that resembled a tablet computer connected to multiple detection wands. What does this thing do? Chemical signature analysis in real time. It can identify explosive compounds, determine age and origin of materials, and detect trace elements that indicate manufacturing location. Rodriguez climbed into the driver's seat, his expression showing the focused intensity that accompanied high-stakes situations. Chen, you're riding with me. Mitchell and Park follow in the backup vehicle with additional personnel. The drive to Central Commerce Bank took 12 minutes through downtown traffic that cleared reluctantly for emergency vehicles. Sarah used the time to study building schematics and review what she knew about commercial explosive placement in financial institutions. Rodriguez, the device placement is critical, she said, analyzing the bank's architectural plans on her tablet. Financial institutions have specific security vulnerabilities that professional groups exploit for maximum psychological impact. What kind of vulnerabilities? Vault areas, customer service areas, and administrative sections all require different evacuation procedures. Placing devices strategically can create evacuation conflicts that increase casualty potential. The bank came into view as Rodriguez rounded the final corner. Central Commerce Bank occupied a corner building from the 1920s, with thick stone walls and limited exit points that created natural choke points during emergency evacuations. Police cars surrounded the building, and Sarah could see evacuation teams establishing perimeters at safe distances. Command post is set up across the street, Rodriguez observed, parking behind the bomb squad truck. Let's see what we're dealing with. Captain Morrison, the incident commander, briefed them as they approached the mobile command unit. Device is located in the main customer area, attached to the information kiosk near the center of the room. Initial visual assessment shows sophisticated electronics and multiple wire bundles. Sarah connected her detection equipment to the command post's communication system, allowing her to monitor electronic signatures from the device location. The readings immediately confirmed her worst fears. The device is transmitting, she announced. Radio frequency emissions consistent with communication equipment. Morrison looked alarmed. Communication with what? Either remote detonation capability or status reporting to external monitoring. Possibly both. Rodriguez studied the building layout displayed on the command post monitors. If it's reporting status, then someone knows we're here and is tracking our response. Sarah adjusted her equipment settings, focusing on the specific frequency patterns emanating from the bank. The transmission pattern includes data packets. Someone is receiving real-time information about our activities. Can you jam the signal? Not without potentially triggering emergency detonation protocols. These devices are designed to explode if they lose communication with their controllers. Morrison keyed his radio. All units assume hostile surveillance of response activities. Maintain communication discipline and limit exposure of technical personnel. Sarah continued monitoring the device's electronic signature, while Rodriguez coordinated with the evacuation teams. The radio transmissions showed increasing activity, suggesting that whoever controlled the bomb was actively managing the situation from a remote location. Captain, I need to get closer to the device for detailed analysis, Sarah said. The electronic patterns indicate multiple activation systems, and I need to identify which ones are functional versus decoy components. Negative. Initial assessment shows the device is significantly more complex than yesterday's configuration. Sarah pulled up comparison data on her tablet, displaying side-by-side analysis of the Roosevelt elementary devices and the current readings from Central Commerce Bank. The complexity is exactly why I need direct access. This isn't just a more advanced bomb. It's a trap specifically designed to eliminate bomb disposal personnel. Rodriguez joined the conversation, his experience evident in the careful way he studied Sarah's data. What kind of trap? Multi-stage detonation with anti-tamper systems that activate based on approach methodology. The device learns from disposal attempts and adapts its defenses accordingly. Morrison shook his head. That's not possible. Explosive devices don't learn. Electronic components integrated with explosive devices can monitor environmental conditions and modify activation protocols based on detected activities. Sarah highlighted specific frequency patterns on her display. This device is equipped with artificial intelligence algorithms that analyze disposal attempts and implement countermeasures. The implications of Sarah's analysis settled over the command post like a dark cloud. If she was correct, the bomb at Central Commerce Bank represented a new generation of explosive technology that could actively defend itself against disposal attempts. How do we disarm something that adapts to our disarming methods? Rodriguez asked. Sarah studied the data streams flowing across her monitors, looking for patterns that might reveal the device's decision-making algorithms. We don't disarm it using conventional methods. We confuse its analytical systems by providing contradictory input data. In English, please. We approach it using methods that don't match any known disposal protocols. The device is programmed to counter standard American bomb disposal techniques, but it might not be prepared for approaches that fall outside normal parameters. Morrison looked skeptical. You want to improvise disposal techniques on a device that could kill 300 people? I want to use unconventional techniques that the device's programming hasn't anticipated. Based on the electronic signature, it's monitoring for specific approach patterns and tool usage. If we avoid those patterns, we might be able to disable it before its adaptive systems can respond. Rodriguez checked his watch. How long do we have? Sarah consulted her equipment readings. The device doesn't appear to have a countdown timer. It's operating in communication mode, waiting for external commands or specific trigger conditions. What kind of trigger conditions? Unknown. But the communication pattern suggests that someone is monitoring our response and will activate detonation based on perceived threats to the device. The radio crackled with an update from the perimeter teams. Command post. We have eyes on possible surveillance team. 2 individuals with electronic equipment positioned in building across the street. Morrison immediately dispatched tactical teams to investigate the surveillance position, while Sarah continued analyzing the device's communication patterns. The electronic signature showed increasing activity as the bomb's controllers apparently detected law enforcement movement toward their observation post. They know we've identified their surveillance, Sarah announced. Communication frequency is shifting to what appears to be activation mode. How long before detonation? Sarah watched data patterns flowing across her screen, trying to interpret the electronic conversations between the bomb and its remote controllers. Unknown, but the pattern shift suggests imminent activation. We need to move immediately. Rodriguez made the command decision that Sarah had been hoping for. Chen, grab your equipment. We're going in. Sarah gathered her specialized tools and followed Rodriguez toward the bank entrance, her heart racing with a combination of excitement and terror. This was the moment she had prepared for during 3 years of private study and equipment acquisition. Either her unconventional approach would prove successful, or she would die alongside Rodriguez in a demonstration of why departments didn't send unqualified personnel into live explosive situations. The bank's interior felt like a cathedral dedicated to financial security. High ceilings, marble columns, and ornate fixtures created an atmosphere of permanent stability that the bomb's presence had shattered completely. The device sat near the center of the customer area, its complex electronics creating a small technological shrine surrounded by scattered papers and abandoned personal belongings. Sarah activated her detection equipment and began the most important analysis of her career. The device was beautiful in its complexity, featuring multiple electronic modules connected by color-coded wires that followed no standard configuration she had ever studied. LED displays showed various data readouts, and sensor arrays monitored environmental conditions with the precision of scientific instruments. This isn't a bomb, she whispered to Rodriguez. It's a computer system that happens to include explosive components. Rodriguez examined the device from a safe distance, his trained eye identifying elements that matched his experience, while noting components that were completely unfamiliar. The explosive charge appears to be secondary to the electronic systems. Sarah connected her analysis equipment to external monitoring devices, allowing her to study the bomb's electronic signature without direct physical contact. The data revealed a sophisticated artificial intelligence system that was actively learning from their presence and adjusting its defensive parameters in real time. It's analyzing our equipment, she announced. The device is identifying our tools and cross-referencing them against known bomb disposal methodologies. Can it identify what we're planning to do? It's trying to, but I'm using equipment and approaches that aren't in standard disposal databases. Sarah began implementing her unconventional strategy, using her specialized sensors to map the device's internal structure without following normal assessment protocols. The bomb's electronic systems responded to her approach by increasing communication activity with the remote controllers. Sarah could see the device attempting to categorize her methods and develop appropriate countermeasures, but her techniques fell outside the parameters it had been programmed to recognize. "I need to physically access the device," she told Rodriguez. "The electronic analysis indicates 3 separate explosive charges with independent activation systems. Disabling them requires direct wire access." Rodriguez checked his radio, maintaining communication with the command post while Sarah prepared for the most dangerous phase of the operation. "Command, we're beginning physical disposal procedures." Chen believes she can disable the device using non-standard techniques. Sarah approached the bomb with movements deliberately chosen to confuse its motion sensors. Instead of the methodical, professional approach that characterized standard disposal procedures, she moved in seemingly random patterns that prevented the device from predicting her intentions. The bomb's artificial intelligence systems struggled to analyze her behavior, creating electronic confusion that Sarah could monitor through her detection equipment. The device's adaptive algorithms were designed to counter professional bomb disposal techniques, not the unconventional methods that Sarah had developed through years of private research. "First charge is accessible," she announced, identifying wires that controlled one of the 3 explosive components. "The device is attempting to implement countermeasures, but it can't categorize my approach methodology." Sarah began cutting wires in sequences that violated every standard disposal protocol she had ever learned. Instead of following established safety procedures, she used her understanding of the device's artificial intelligence to predict and avoid its defensive responses. Each wire cut created electronic confusion within the bomb's control systems as its algorithms attempted to categorize her actions and implement appropriate countermeasures. But Sarah's approach was deliberately inconsistent, preventing the device from establishing patterns that could guide its defensive programming. "Second charge disabled," she reported, moving to the next phase of her improvised disposal sequence. "The device is losing analytical coherence. Its programming can't adapt to methodologies that change randomly." Rodriguez monitored her progress while maintaining communication with the command post, where Captain Morrison coordinated with tactical teams that had successfully detained the surveillance personnel. The remote controllers no longer had visual confirmation of disposal activities, forcing them to rely entirely on the bomb's automated systems. "Final charge is protected by motion sensors and pressure triggers," Sarah announced. "Standard approaches would activate immediate detonation, but the device's confusion about my methodology is creating processing delays." She reached the most critical moment of the disposal operation, where a single mistake would result in immediate death for everyone within the bank's blast radius. Sarah's specialized training had prepared her for this instant, but no training could have anticipated the psychological pressure of defusing a device that actively tried to kill her. The final wire sequence required precise timing and complete faith in her analysis of the device's artificial intelligence systems. Sarah cut the last wire with movements that deliberately violated disposal protocols, using her understanding of the bomb's programming limitations to achieve success through apparent incompetence. The device's electronic systems struggled for several seconds, attempting to process her actions and implement appropriate responses. Finally, all LED displays shifted to inactive status, and the communication equipment stopped transmitting entirely. "Device is neutralized," Sarah announced, sitting back on her heels as the magnitude of her accomplishment settled over her. Rodriguez keyed his radio with obvious relief. "Command, device is successfully disabled. All personnel are safe." Sarah remained beside the disabled bomb, studying its complex electronics and thinking about the implications of what she had just accomplished. She had defeated an artificial intelligence system using methods that no training program could have taught, proving that sometimes the best preparation was the willingness to abandon preparation entirely. As evacuation teams began allowing people to leave the bank, Sarah carefully documented the device's configuration for future analysis. The electronic components would provide valuable intelligence about the criminal network's capabilities and help law enforcement prepare for similar devices in other cities. Rodriguez approached her as she packed her equipment. "Chen, what you did here today, the improvised techniques, the unconventional approach, how did you know it would work?" Sarah considered the question while coiling cables and securing sensitive instruments. "I didn't know. But I understood that conventional approaches would definitely fail, so unconventional methods were our only option. You could have gotten us both killed. People were definitely going to die if we didn't try something. At least this way we had a chance." As they walked toward the bank exit, Sarah felt the same satisfaction she had experienced after Roosevelt Elementary, but magnified by the knowledge that she had proven herself twice in 2 days. The department could no longer dismiss her as an unqualified support technician who was too careful for field work. Captain Morrison met them at the command post, his expression showing a mixture of relief and bewilderment. "Chen, I want a complete report on your disposal methodology. The FBI is going to want detailed analysis of how you defeated an adaptive artificial intelligence system." Sarah nodded, knowing that the report would either establish her as a legitimate explosive disposal expert or end her career if supervisors decided her methods were too dangerous to tolerate. Either way, she had saved lives using knowledge and skills that no one else in the department possessed. The afternoon brought a stream of interviews, debriefings, and technical consultations as various agencies tried to understand how a small city police detective had successfully countered technology that had defeated federal experts in multiple cities. Sarah answered questions patiently, documenting her methods and explaining the reasoning behind her unconventional approaches. Agent Rebecca Walsh arrived from the FBI field office as Sarah completed her incident report. Walsh was a compact woman in her 40s, with eyes that suggested extensive experience with explosive devices and the people who built them. "Detective Chen, I understand you've had an interesting couple of days," Walsh said, settling into a chair beside Sarah's desk. "More interesting than usual," Sarah replied diplomatically. Walsh opened a briefcase containing photographs and documents related to explosive incidents in other cities. "These devices that you've successfully disabled represent technology that we've been tracking for 8 months. Criminal network with connections to Eastern European organized crime, using advanced explosive configurations to target American law enforcement." Sarah studied the photographs, recognizing elements from her private research in each device. "The artificial intelligence components are new, but the basic configurations follow patterns established by Soviet military engineers in the 1980s. Most bomb disposal experts haven't made that connection. Most bomb disposal experts focus on current American configurations. I studied historical patterns to understand how explosive technology evolves over time." Walsh leaned forward, her expression showing the kind of interest that suggested opportunity. "Detective Chen, would you be interested in consulting with federal task forces on cases involving advanced explosive technology?" The question represented everything Sarah had worked toward for 3 years. Recognition of her expertise, opportunities to use her specialized knowledge, and validation that her careful preparation had been worthwhile. "I would be very interested," Sarah replied. "Good. Because based on the intelligence we've gathered from today's surveillance team, this criminal network is planning additional attacks in multiple cities. We need someone who understands their technology and can develop countermeasures." As Walsh outlined the federal consultation opportunities, Sarah felt her career shifting in directions she had never imagined possible. 3 years ago, she had been a logistics specialist filing equipment reports and updating inventory records. Today, she was being recruited by the FBI to help counter an international criminal network. The transformation felt surreal, but it also felt earned. Every hour she had spent studying explosive configurations, every dollar she had invested in specialized equipment, every moment of preparation that others had dismissed as obsessive, had contributed to this opportunity. Sarah looked around the bomb squad bay, at the workstation where she had spent 3 years being told she wasn't qualified for field assignments, and realized that sometimes being too careful was exactly the preparation that impossible situations required. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new devices, and new opportunities to prove that thorough preparation was the foundation of effective action. But tonight was for celebrating the fact that Safety Sarah had become exactly the kind of expert that dangerous situations demanded. 6 months after Central Commerce Bank, Sarah Chen stood in the federal training facility at Quantico, watching a new class of bomb disposal specialists struggle with a simulation that she had helped design. The device on the training table incorporated elements from the Eastern European network's technology, modified to challenge conventional thinking without actually endangering trainees. "The key is recognizing when standard procedures become liabilities," Sarah explained to the assembled technicians, her voice carrying the authority that came from successful field experience. "These devices are specifically engineered to exploit our training, to turn our expertise against us," Agent Walsh observed from the back of the classroom, taking notes on Sarah's instruction methods. The federal consultation had evolved into a permanent position with the FBI's Explosive Device Analysis Unit, where Sarah now served as the primary specialist for adaptive and artificial intelligence-enhanced explosive systems. Detective Chen, one of the trainees, asked, "How do you develop countermeasures for devices that can learn from your actions?" Sarah smiled, remembering when she had asked similar questions during her own early training. You stop thinking like a bomb disposal expert and start thinking like the device itself. What is it trying to accomplish? What does it expect you to do? How can you disappoint those expectations? The training session concluded with the successful disarmament of the simulation device, achieved through techniques that would have been considered dangerous incompetence 6 months earlier. Sarah watched the trainees pack their equipment with the satisfaction of someone who had helped expand the boundaries of what was considered possible. Walsh approached her as the classroom emptied. "The director wants to see you." Something about a new development in the network investigation. Sarah gathered her materials and followed Walsh through corridors lined with photographs of agents who had made significant contributions to federal law enforcement. Her own photograph would soon join that collection, recognition of her role in developing countermeasures against advanced explosive technology. Director Marcus Hayes occupied a corner office with windows overlooking the training complex, where agents learned to handle the most dangerous aspects of federal law enforcement. Hayes had spent 20 years with the Bureau, rising through investigations of domestic terrorism and international criminal networks. "Detective Chen, please sit down," Hayes said, gesturing toward chairs arranged around a conference table. "Agent Walsh has briefed me on your work with the Eastern European network investigation." Sarah settled into a chair, noticing additional files and photographs spread across the table. The materials appeared to document explosive incidents from multiple cities, suggesting that the criminal network had expanded operations significantly. "The surveillance team we captured at Central Commerce Bank provided intelligence that led to arrests in Boston, Philadelphia, and Detroit," Hayes continued. "However, the network appears to have adapted to our countermeasures and is developing new technologies." He opened one of the files to reveal photographs of explosive devices that incorporated elements Sarah recognized alongside components she had never seen before. The bombs showed clear evolutionary development, building on previous designs while adding features that appeared designed to counter her specific disarmament techniques. "They're learning from our successes," Sarah observed, studying the device configurations. "Each new design incorporates countermeasures against the methods that defeated previous devices." Walsh joined the conversation, pulling up additional photographs on a laptop computer. "Intelligence suggests they've recruited electronics specialists with artificial intelligence expertise. The devices are becoming more sophisticated faster than we can develop countermeasures." Sarah examined the photographs carefully, noting the progression from simple timer devices to complex electronic systems that resembled computer networks more than traditional bombs. "These aren't just explosive devices anymore. They're research platforms designed to study our response capabilities." "Which brings us to why you're here," Hayes said. "The network has announced their intention to demonstrate their technological superiority through what they're calling a, quote, final examination of American bomb disposal capabilities." The words sent a chill through Sarah's chest. A final examination suggested something far more complex and dangerous than the devices she had encountered at Roosevelt Elementary and Central Commerce Bank. "What kind of final examination?" she asked. Hayes opened another file containing intelligence reports and intercepted communications. Multiple devices deployed simultaneously across several cities, each one incorporating the most advanced technology they've developed. "The goal appears to be proving that their systems can defeat any countermeasures we've created." Sarah studied the intelligence reports, recognizing patterns that suggested a coordinated campaign designed to overwhelm law enforcement response capabilities. "Multiple simultaneous deployments would spread our resources thin and prevent us from applying concentrated expertise to any single device." "Exactly, which is why we need to be proactive rather than reactive." Walsh pulled up a map showing potential target cities, each one marked with threat assessment data. "Intelligence suggests they're planning to target locations with symbolic significance and high casualty potential." The map showed major cities across the eastern United States, with threat indicators suggesting that the criminal network had the capability to strike multiple targets within a compressed time frame. Sarah felt the weight of responsibility settling on her shoulders, as she realized that her expertise might be the difference between successful prevention and catastrophic failure. "What's the timeline?" she asked. Intelligence suggests deployment within 72 hours, Hayes replied. We have that long to identify target locations and position response teams with appropriate countermeasures. Sarah stood up and walked to the map, studying the threat indicators and trying to identify patterns that might reveal the network's strategic thinking. They'll choose targets that showcase their technological superiority while maximizing psychological impact. Government buildings, educational institutions, transportation hubs. That's our assessment as well. The question is whether we can anticipate their specific choices and prepare appropriate responses. Sarah continued studying the map, her mind processing the strategic implications of a coordinated attack designed to demonstrate the futility of conventional bomb disposal techniques. They're not just trying to cause casualties, they're trying to prove that traditional expertise is obsolete. Walsh highlighted several cities on the map. We have teams positioning in Boston, New York, Philadelphia, Washington, D.C., and Atlanta. Each team includes specialists trained in your countermeasures, but each device will probably be unique, Sarah finished. Designed to counter specific techniques and exploit different vulnerabilities. Hayes nodded grimly. Which means we need you to coordinate response efforts and provide real-time analysis as situations develop. The assignment represented the ultimate validation of Sarah's expertise, but also the ultimate test of whether her unconventional methods could succeed on a larger scale. She would be responsible for guiding multiple response teams through situations that might require completely different approaches. I'll need direct communication with all response teams and access to real-time intelligence from each location, Sarah said. If the devices are designed to counter my previous methods, I'll need to develop new approaches in real time. Granted, you'll operate from our command center with complete authority to coordinate technical responses. Sarah spent the next 2 days preparing for what she knew would be the most challenging test of her career. She reviewed intelligence reports, studied potential target locations, and developed multiple contingency plans for different device configurations. The preparation felt familiar, reminiscent of the private research that had prepared her for Roosevelt Elementary, but magnified to encompass an entire criminal network's capabilities. The Federal Command Center occupied an entire floor of a building in downtown Washington, with communications equipment that could coordinate law enforcement responses across multiple states simultaneously. Sarah's workstation included direct links to bomb disposal teams in 5 cities, along with real-time intelligence feeds from surveillance operations targeting known network associates. Agent Walsh served as her primary liaison with field teams, while Director Hayes coordinated with political leadership and international intelligence agencies. The atmosphere in the command center carried the tension that preceded major law enforcement operations, where success or failure would be measured in lives saved or lost. Intelligence update, Walsh announced, approaching Sarah's workstation with new information. Surveillance teams report unusual activity at 3 locations. Boston, Philadelphia, and New York all show indicators consistent with device deployment. Sarah studied the intelligence reports, noting patterns that suggested the network was implementing their final examination ahead of schedule. They're accelerating the timeline. Probably detected our surveillance and decided to act before we could position additional countermeasures. The command center erupted into controlled chaos as confirmation came in from multiple cities. Boston reported a device discovered at South Station, Philadelphia found one at Independence Hall, and New York confirmed a bomb at Grand Central Terminal. Each location represented maximum symbolic impact and casualty potential. All teams report devices are significantly more complex than previous encounters, Hayes announced. Electronic signatures suggest artificial intelligence systems with capabilities beyond anything we've previously seen. Sarah activated her communication links with all 3 response teams, her workstation displaying real-time data from each location. The devices showed clear technological evolution from her previous encounters, incorporating countermeasures specifically designed to defeat her proven techniques. Boston team? What's your assessment? She asked, studying data feeds from South Station. Device appears to be monitoring our equipment signatures and adapting its configuration in real time, came the reply. Every time we change our approach, it modifies its defensive systems. Sarah felt a familiar chill as she realized the network had successfully created devices that could learn faster than disposal teams could adapt. Philadelphia team, similar situation? Affirmative. device is actively analyzing our techniques and implementing countermeasures. It's like fighting something that knows what we're going to do before we do it. The New York team reported identical challenges, confirming Sarah's worst fears about the network's technological advancement. They had created artificial intelligence systems that could observe, learn, and adapt faster than human specialists could develop new approaches. These devices aren't just defending themselves, Sarah announced to the command center. They're sharing information with each other. What one device learns, they all learn. Walsh looked up from her communication console. Are you saying they're networked? I'm saying they're operating as a collective intelligence. Each device benefits from the experiences of all the others. They're designed to defeat any technique that proves successful against any part of the network. The implications of Sarah's analysis settled over the command center like a dark cloud. If the devices could share learning experiences, then successful techniques would be immediately countered across all locations. Traditional bomb disposal expertise had become not just ineffective, but actively dangerous. How do we fight something that learns from our successes? Hayes asked. Sarah studied the data feeds from all three cities, looking for patterns that might reveal weaknesses in the network's collective intelligence. We don't fight it, we confuse it. If the devices are sharing information, we can feed them contradictory data that overwhelms their analytical capabilities. She began coordinating a strategy that would have been impossible with conventional explosive devices. Instead of trying to defeat each bomb individually, she would use the network's interconnectedness against itself. Boston team, begin approach using standard protocols, but stop before making contact with the device. I wanted to analyze your equipment and techniques without completing the disposal sequence. Understood. Beginning standard approach now. Sarah monitored the electronic signatures from all three devices, watching as they processed information about the Boston team's equipment and methods. Philadelphia team, begin approach using completely different equipment and techniques. I want to see how the network handles contradictory analytical data. The Philadelphia team implemented an approach that contradicted everything the Boston device had learned, using different tools and following completely different protocols. Sarah watched the network's artificial intelligence system struggle to reconcile the contradictory information. New York team, wait for my signal, then begin approach using techniques that combine elements from both previous attempts. Sarah's strategy was designed to create analytical confusion within the network's collective intelligence. By feeding the devices contradictory information about human disposal techniques, she hoped to overwhelm their adaptive capabilities and create opportunities for successful intervention. Network shows signs of processing overload, she announced, watching electronic signatures fluctuate as the artificial intelligence system struggled with contradictory data. The devices are trying to adapt to techniques that contradict each other. The confusion created by her strategy provided the opening that field teams needed. While the network's collective intelligence struggled to process contradictory information, individual devices became vulnerable to disposal techniques that fell outside their analytical parameters. Boston team device appears to be an analytical loop. Begin disposal using hybrid approach combining elements from previous successful techniques. Sarah coordinated simultaneous disposal attempts across all three cities, using the network's shared intelligence against itself. As each device struggled to adapt to techniques that contradicted its collective knowledge, disposal teams gained precious minutes to complete their work. Boston device neutralized, came the first report. Philadelphia successful, followed immediately after. New York device disabled, completed the sequence. Sarah sat back in her chair, breathing heavily as the magnitude of what they had accomplished settled over her. They had defeated an artificial intelligence network by using its own capabilities against itself, proving that human creativity could still triumph over technological sophistication. Hayes approached her workstation, his expression showing relief mixed with amazement. Detective Chen, you just coordinated the successful disposal of 3 interconnected artificial intelligence-enhanced explosive devices. I'm not sure that's ever been accomplished before. Sarah looked at the data feeds from all 3 cities, where teams were beginning the process of documenting and analyzing the disabled devices. The network made one critical error. They assumed that shared intelligence would always be an advantage. What do you mean? They created a system where every device learned from every other device's experiences, but learning can become a liability when you're fed information designed to confuse rather than educate. Walsh joined the conversation, carrying preliminary reports from the field teams. Initial analysis suggests these devices represented the most advanced explosive technology ever deployed against civilian targets. The artificial intelligence systems were capable of real-time adaptation and collective learning. Sarah studied the preliminary reports, recognizing elements from her previous encounters while noting innovations that suggested continuing technological development. This was their final examination, but it was also our graduation exercise. We've proven that human expertise can evolve faster than artificial intelligence when properly applied. The successful coordination of multiple simultaneous disposals established Sarah as the federal government's primary specialist for advanced explosive technology. Her techniques would be incorporated into training programs nationwide, and her strategies would guide law enforcement responses to similar threats in the future. Over the following weeks, Sarah found herself briefing congressional committees, consulting with international intelligence agencies, and developing protocols for countering artificial intelligence-enhanced explosive devices. The journey from overlooked logistics specialist to federal expert felt surreal, but it also felt earned through years of careful preparation and consistent dedication. The bomb squad bay at Riverside Police Station felt smaller when Sarah returned for a final visit before permanently transferring to federal service. Rodriguez and the team had gathered to celebrate her promotion and acknowledge the transformation that her success had brought to their own capabilities. "Hard to believe this is where Safety Sarah started," Mitchell said, gesturing toward the corner workstation where Sarah had spent 3 years filing reports and maintaining equipment. Sarah smiled at the nickname that had once stung, but now felt like a badge of honor. Being too careful turned out to be careful enough when it really mattered. Rodriguez presented her with a plaque commemorating her service with the department, but the real recognition came in the form of respect from colleagues who had finally understood that thorough preparation was the foundation of successful action. "Any advice for the next person who gets assigned to that corner?" Park asked. Sarah looked at her former workstation, remembering the frustration of being overlooked and the determination that had driven her to prepare for opportunities that might never come. "Study everything, question everything, prepare for situations that seem impossible. You never know when impossible becomes exactly what's needed." Lieutenant Davis approached her as the celebration wound down. "Chen, I owe you an apology. For 3 years we saw your preparation as obsession and your caution as weakness." "You saw what the training taught you to see," Sarah replied. "The system wasn't designed to recognize unconventional expertise." "What changed?" Sarah considered the question while packing the last of her personal equipment. "The threats changed. The system had to evolve or become obsolete." As she drove away from Riverside Police Station for the last time, Sarah reflected on the journey that had taken her from dismissed logistics specialist to federal expert. The transformation hadn't happened overnight, but had been built through years of quiet preparation and persistent dedication to excellence that others couldn't recognize. Her new office at the FBI's Explosive Device Analysis Unit occupied a corner of a building where the country's most dangerous threats were studied and countered. The walls were covered with technical diagrams and analysis charts, while her desk held equipment that represented the cutting edge of explosive detection and disposal technology. Agent Walsh knocked on her doorframe, carrying files related to a new case that had emerged from international intelligence sources. "Chen, we have reports of similar network activity in Europe. They want your consultation on countermeasures." Sarah looked up from the analysis she had been working on, a technical paper that would establish protocols for responding to artificial intelligence-enhanced explosive devices. How similar? Identical technological signatures. Same collective intelligence approach, same adaptive capabilities. They're asking for your expertise in developing response strategies. The request represented recognition that her methods had applications beyond American law enforcement, that the techniques she had developed could contribute to international security efforts. Sarah felt the satisfaction that came from knowing her careful preparation had created knowledge that could save lives worldwide. "I'll review the intelligence reports and provide analysis," she said. "If they're using similar technology, then our countermeasures should be adaptable to their operational context." As Walsh left her office, Sarah returned to her analysis with the knowledge that her work was contributing to law enforcement capabilities that extended far beyond the bomb squad bay where she had started. The journey from Safety Sarah to federal expert had been built through years of preparation that others had dismissed as unnecessary obsession. 6 months later, Sarah stood before the International Conference on Explosive Ordnance Disposal, addressing an audience of specialists from 30 countries. Her presentation covered the techniques that had proven successful against artificial intelligence-enhanced devices, providing guidance that would shape international responses to similar threats. The key insight, she told the assembled experts, is recognizing when conventional expertise becomes a liability. These devices are designed to exploit our training, our protocols, our predictable responses. Success requires the willingness to abandon everything we think we know about explosive ordnance disposal. The audience included specialists who had spent decades developing expertise in conventional bomb disposal techniques. Sarah understood their skepticism about abandoning proven methods, but she also knew that evolving threats required evolving responses. The devices I encountered were specifically engineered to defeat the techniques that made us successful in previous situations. Our expertise became their weapon against us. We had to learn to think like beginners again, to approach each device as if we knew nothing about explosive ordnance disposal. During the question period that followed her presentation, a specialist from Germany asked about the psychological challenges of abandoning proven techniques under life-threatening pressure. The psychological challenge is accepting that everything you've learned might be wrong in specific situations, Sarah replied. But the alternative is watching people die because you're too committed to methods that have become obsolete. After the conference, Sarah was approached by representatives from multiple countries requesting consultation on cases involving advanced explosive technology. Her expertise had become an international resource. Recognition that the techniques she had developed applied to threats that extended far beyond American borders. The flight back to Washington gave her time to reflect on the transformation that had taken her from overlooked police detective to international expert. The journey had been built through years of preparation that others had dismissed, validated by crisis situations that required exactly the kind of thorough knowledge she had developed. Her apartment near FBI headquarters was filled with technical journals, research papers, and equipment that reflected her continuing commitment to staying ahead of evolving threats. The work never ended because the threats never stopped evolving, but Sarah had learned to find satisfaction in the process of continuous learning and adaptation. Kevin called her that evening, his voice filled with pride that had replaced the gentle teasing of previous years. Saw your interview on the news about the international conference. Mom and Dad would have been proud to see their daughter teaching experts from around the world. Sarah smiled, remembering their parents who had passed away during her early years with the police department. They always said careful preparation was never wasted effort. Think they were talking about homework, not bomb disposal. Same principle applies. Be ready for whatever comes, even if you don't know what that might be. As she prepared for sleep, Sarah looked out her bedroom window at the lights of Washington, D.C., where policymakers and security specialists worked to protect the country from threats that evolved faster than traditional expertise could adapt. Her work contributed to that protection by proving that human creativity could still triumph over technological sophistication when properly applied. The next morning brought new cases, new challenges, and new opportunities to prove that being too careful was exactly the right amount of careful when lives hung in the balance. Sarah arrived at her office carrying coffee and a notebook filled with ideas for improving explosive device countermeasures, continuing the same habits that had sustained her through years of preparation and validation. Agent Walsh met her at the elevator, carrying files related to a potential network resurgence in the Pacific Northwest. Chen, looks like they're trying to make a comeback using modified technology. Sarah accepted the files with the confidence that came from knowing her expertise could adapt to whatever modifications the criminal networks had developed. Modified how? Unknown, but intelligence suggests they've learned from our previous countermeasures and are implementing new approaches. Sarah smiled as they walked toward her office. Then we'll have to learn faster than they can adapt. Fortunately, that's exactly what we've been training for. The files contained intelligence that suggested the criminal network had indeed evolved their technology, incorporating countermeasures against the techniques that had proven successful during the previous campaign. But Sarah had evolved too, developing new approaches that built on her previous successes while preparing for threats that hadn't emerged yet. 3 years after Roosevelt Elementary, Sarah Chen had become exactly what she had always prepared to be, someone who was ready for whatever impossible situations might require. The nickname Safety Sarah had transformed from criticism to recognition, acknowledgement that being too careful was exactly the level of preparation that impossible situations demanded. As she began analyzing the new intelligence reports, Sarah felt the familiar satisfaction that came from putting careful preparation to work, solving problems that others considered unsolvable. The work would continue, the threats would evolve, and she would adapt to meet them with the same thorough dedication that had carried her from equipment manifests to international expertise. Some people were built for emergency response, others for careful analysis, still others for leadership under pressure. Sarah had discovered that she was built for the space between all of them, where thorough preparation met impossible situations and created opportunities for success that no one thought possible. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.